Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Carson, the president of the New York State Bar Association, and I welcome you all to the annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association. I call the meeting to order, and we will begin this morning by hearing the National Anthem, and I invite you to join in. By the way, this is the recording of the National Anthem that was played at the 2020 gala. So please join us, and we'll at this time play the National Anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
It was a stirring rendition when we heard it last year, and it remains a stirring rendition. And it kind of takes your breath away. But that was, of course, and I apologize for not recalling his name, but he was the actor from Hamilton. I believe he played George Washington, and did a great job. We now move to the next item on the agenda of the annual meeting this morning, which is the approval of the minutes of the June 31st, 2020 annual meeting. I will make a motion to approve those minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting of June 31st, 2020 be approved. Any discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All in favor? Do we have a voting chart, or we simply do a voice vote? Okay, we do have a voting chart. Motion to approve the minutes. Please register your vote on the chart that appears before you. Okay, the motion carries decisively, so thank you all very much. The next item of business is the report of the Nominating Committee and the election of elected delegates to the House of Delegates. And for that, we call upon Sharon Stern Gersman, former president of the association and current chair of the Nominating Committee. Sharon, are you ready to go?
Thank you, Scott. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I submit the following nominations for elected delegates to the House of Delegates. I will apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. Susan B. Lindenauer, the Honorable Cheryl Chambers, and Peter Harvey from the 1st District. Andrew M. Fallick, Anthony W. Vaughn, Pauline Jung Ha from the 2nd District. Jane Bello Burke, Elena DeFeo Keene, and a person to be determined from the 3rd District. Mary Elizabeth Moreno, Margaret E. Gilmartin, Nicole L. Coutier from the 4th District. Courtney S. Raddick, Donald C. Dorr, Stuart LaRose from the 5th District. Andrea Adiwe, Robert M. Schaefer, Michael R. May from the 6th District. Dwayne T. Basco, Stephen M. Kelly, Amy E. Schwartz-Wallace from the 7th District. Norman P. Effman, Michael M. Moen, and Leah Nowatarski from the 8th District. Karen Beltran, Claire J. Degnan, the Honorable Linda S. Jameson from the 9th District. Stephen G. Leventhal, Peter H. Levy, and A. Craig Purcell from the 10th District. Karen Dabowski Barba, Stephen Wimpheimer, and the Honorable Karina E. Alamar from the 11th District. Stephen E. Milan, Samuel Braverman, and Adam J. Sheldon from the 12th District. And to Alan J. Crawford, Edwina Francis Martin, Sheila T. McGinn, from the 13th District. This concludes my report on behalf of the Nominating Committee.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, would you care to make a motion to close nominations?
Yes, I move to close the nominations.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the nominations so that, in effect, no further nominations can be offered. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote on the motion to close nominations. And please complete the ballot that appears on your screen.
The motion carried, Scott.
Okay. I'm advised that the motion carries. Now, Sharon, I would now ask that you make a motion for a vote on the election of the delegates.
Thank you, Scott. I now move that a single unanimous ballot be cast by the Secretary for the election of the elected delegate nominees to the House of Delegates.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we will now move to a vote on the motion to authorize the Secretary to cast a single unanimous ballot for the election of the named delegates. Well, the motion has carried very decisively, and Sharon, I thank you for your work as chair of the nominating committee, and I congratulate the newly elected delegates who will take office on June the 1st. And to them, my hearty congratulations to all of them, and my thanks for their willingness to take on service on behalf of the association. And again, to you, Sharon, thank you.
And in the words of King George III, I'll be back.
Okay, yes, you will. Somehow it's not as ominous coming from you as it is from King George, but we'll see. At this time, I have the singular honor and pleasure of introducing to those in attendance the Chief Judge of the State of New York to deliver her address to the annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association. I recognize the Honorable Janet D. Fiore, Chief Judge of the State of New York. Your Honor.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking your President, Scott Carson, and this House of Delegates for inviting me to address you once again. A year ago, I joined you in the ballroom in the New York Hilton Midtown and proudly described the significant progress that we had made together to improve the performance of our court system under the banner of our Excellence Initiative. I spoke about the significant reduction in backlog and new processes designed to enhance case processing, provide better outcomes for lawyers and their clients, and our all-out effort to integrate presumptive early ADR into our civil and family case management systems statewide. And I spoke about our historic proposal to amend the state constitution to simplify and modernize the structure of our trial courts in order to give us the flexibility to adjust our resources to meet the changing needs of our constituents, the lawyers and litigants in our courts. Within a few short weeks of my presentation that morning, highlighting all of our forward progress, New York became the national epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak. Our plans and expectations changed immediately. All of our effort and energy quickly turned to standing up a virtual court system as fast as humanly possible in order to keep our courts open with as few people as possible in our buildings and ensure the broadest, safest access to the courts that we could. 11 months later, we remain laser focused on responding to the daily challenges of the pandemic, continually refining our virtual model and with our eye keenly trained on a smart plan for the future. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we determined that the courts would never close, could never close, and that they would remain open and functioning to hear emergency and essential matters. We recognize our responsibility to lawyers and litigants, and we knew that we needed to send an important message to the public that no matter the disruption caused by the pandemic, our courts would continue to deliver justice and uphold the rule of law. And as you may recall, in mid-March, we limited in-person operations to essential and emergency applications only. And we worked around the clock to stand up a virtual court model that would allow us to hear cases and at the same time remain fully compliant with the public health protocols promulgated to stop the spread of the virus. And our folks did an amazing job, and they did their job in record time. By early April, judges and staff were working remotely to conference cases in all of our courts across the state. And in the months that followed, the new virtual model was fully embraced, and we all became more proficient and productive in that space, to the point where today we're conferencing well over 20,000 cases per week, narrowing disputed issues, referring matters to virtual ADR, deciding motions, settling thousands of cases, and conducting hundreds of virtual hearings and bench trials every week. At the same time that we were expanding and refining our virtual courts, we were working on a parallel track to prepare our courthouses for the resumption of in-person proceedings. And if you have been to one of our courthouses lately, you know that we have retrofitted our facilities and instituted extensive safety measures to protect the health of everyone who enters and works in our buildings. And our leadership team, with the aid of the excellent recommendations and best practices issued by our Commission on the Future of New York State Courts, chaired by immediate past President Hank Greenberg, was able to safely resume in-person proceedings over the summer and fall months, including the impaneling of grand juries and the resumption of a limited number of civil and criminal jury trials statewide. The virus then began its resurgence in mid-November, and we are back now to conducting the vast majority of court business virtually for the time being. And we will be patient and disciplined while the vaccine is rolled out and the second wave subsides, but we are ready for a full return to service, which will be not only a new normal, but a better normal, benefited and informed by all of the lessons we are learning and the confidence we are gaining. We are grateful to the members of the State Bar for your resilience and ingenuity in serving your clients during the pandemic, and for your support and cooperation as we have gone through all of the many operational iterations necessary to continue the business of the courts. It hasn't been perfect, but I do believe that we've done a very effective job to ensure the broadest access to our courts while operating within the bounds and guidelines of public health, safety, and welfare. The fluid and unpredictable nature of COVID-19 has taught us to be better at the things we have not done well in the past. This virus and its unrelenting force has compelled us to be flexible and nimble in our operational decision-making. At times, we were required to scrap our well-laid plans on literally a moment's notice, and for a group not always known for our ready facility, we did just fine because we all sadly came to experience just how quickly the virus spread and often had no choice but to make quick decisions affecting court functions and operations. I have no doubt that over the course of this last almost year, many of these operational twists and turns were a source of great frustration and at times even confusion to some of you. But I hope that our Monday messages have served their intended purpose to provide the bar and others with timely information regarding court operations and transparency around the hundreds of decisions we have made to keep the courts functioning and the reasons why we made those decisions. We will continue to keep the lines of communication open, both at the local level through our administrative judges and at the statewide level, and I will continue to deliver my Monday message as I have on each Monday morning since March 23rd for as long as there is relevant and helpful information to be reported. Turning now for a moment to our judiciary budget. As all of you know, New York State is facing an unprecedented budget deficit with serious consequences looming on the horizon. The judiciary has not been and will not be spared. We have already absorbed and adjusted for an unprecedented $300 million or 10% reduction in our current budget, funding that had been previously approved for allocation in this current fiscal year. In order to achieve that magnitude of cost savings in our current budget, we had to make some very difficult decisions, including instituting a strict employee hiring freeze, deferring employee raises, eliminating all non-essential discretionary spending, suspending our JHO program, and denying all but 3 of the applications of Supreme Court justices who were requesting to be considered for certification in order to remain on the bench for an additional 2 years beyond their expired terms of office. These actions allowed us to survive with the unexpected circumstance of $300 million less in our current budget. Turning to our budget request for the coming fiscal year that begins on April 1st, 2021, that prospective request is austere. It seeks no additional funding beyond this current fiscal year's reduced budget, and we are absolutely and adamantly opposed to any further cuts in our budget. Additional reductions would require us to lay off a large number of court staff, which would cripple court operations and would cripple our ability to meet the demand for our services as we navigate the pandemic and beyond. The combination of attrition and a strict hiring freeze preventing us from backfilling vacant positions will likely leave us with 1,000 less employees than we had last March. These are court officers, court clerks, back office staff, interpreters, and the many others who serve primarily in our high-volume criminal, family, and housing courts, the very courts which serve the countless working and low-income New Yorkers who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic and where we expect to see a surge of pandemic-related filings. History has taught us that mass layoffs lead not only to the obvious and immediate short-term impacts, but take years to climb back from. We have lived through this scenario before, and we have suffered its impact. Immediate reductions in services and operating hours, and long-term case backlogs and delays that devastated our court system for many years. We cannot afford to go down this road again, especially in the times we are living, and since we have proved, working together, that our excellence initiative worked. The courts were functioning well, lawyers and litigants were at the forefront of our efforts, and case processing was improving in every corner of the state. Judges and staff were excited and motivated, and lawyers and litigants were the beneficiaries of our efforts. So we need you, and we call on you, our colleagues and allies in the State Bar, to make your voices heard in support of our budget, and to make clear to our partners in government how any further reductions in court funding would be devastating to the millions of individuals, families, businesses, and communities that rely on our courts for critical justice services. While 2020 will go down in history as the year of the COVID pandemic, it will also be remembered for our national reckoning on racial injustice. Last June, when the police killing of George Floyd was followed only days later by a racist Facebook posting by one of our court officers, I asked Jay Johnson, former Secretary of Homeland Security and partner at Paul Weiss, to conduct an independent equal justice review of our court system's policies and practices as they relate to issues of racial justice. Secretary Johnson did his work, made his findings and recommendations, and we have fully embraced every one of them, and we are in the process of developing specific implementation plans and timelines for all of the recommendations. I want to take this opportunity to thank President Carson for speaking out in support of our equal justice efforts, and to commend him for appointing the Task Force on Racial Injustice and Police Reform, co-chaired by President-elect T. Andrew Brown and distinguished attorney Taya Graves, in order to examine the issues that contribute to police misconduct and recommend reforms to end criminal justice practices that disproportionately harm people of color. The bench and bar have a solemn responsibility to combat racial injustice and sustain public faith in our ability to deliver equal justice under the law, and we are stepping up to our responsibilities. Finally, I want to take a moment to talk about court simplification. Managing the largest, busiest, and most complex court system in the country is a challenge in ordinary times. But our experiences in navigating the courts through this historic pandemic have only served to underscore the need to simplify our court system and put to rest the folly that our current court structure is the best that we can provide. Our trial court system is outdated, it is inefficient, and it is harmful to the interests of Black, brown, and low-income people. Our dockets are building and are fully expected to explode in certain courts. To be hamstrung by an organizational model that has not been updated since 1962 and that prevents us from applying our resources quickly and flexibly in response to the needs dictated by our filings is simply wrong and it reflects a lack of respect for the public we serve. The pandemic interrupted the encouraging progress we were making to advance our constitutional proposal to simplify the courts. We remain fully committed to accomplishing court simplification, and we will be relying on your continued support as well as our experience in managing the courts through the pandemic to help us make the case for how a simplified, streamlined court system will enhance access to justice and improve the efficiency and quality of our services. Our current structure serves only the interest of a very few. It does not serve the interest of those who struggle to achieve access to justice, and it certainly does not serve the interests of the bar. In the 1940s, as the world was approaching the end of World War II, Winston Churchill famously said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." I have every confidence going forward that smart policy and lawmakers are primed not to waste this crisis and ready to put the millions of represented and unrepresented litigants who appear in our courts first. The plan is proposed. It is not a complicated lift. Let's all work together to get this done. In each of the past 2 years, I have spoken to you about the rule of law and how we as judges, lawyers, and officers of the court have a special responsibility to uphold the rule of law. Our commitment in this regard led us to plan a joint convocation for last May on the role of the bench and bar in improving civic education in our schools, which of course had to be postponed. Our purpose was to bring judges, lawyers, and educators together to develop solutions to the widespread decline in civic knowledge. We, all of us together, the bench and the bar, are called upon to take a leadership role in promoting public understanding about the critical role of the courts and the rule of law in our society, and I sincerely hope that we can get back to working with our educators on those vital issues as soon as practicable. We look forward to restarting that plan. So finally, let me thank you again for inviting me to address the House of Delegates this year. I greatly appreciate all that you have done over the last 11 months to support our courts and our justice system, and I pledge to all of you that we will continue to work in service to our lawyers and litigants to improve the administration of justice for the benefit of the public we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for those informative and inspiring words. We thank you for taking the time to impart those words to us. We're grateful, and we pledge that the New York State Bar Association will always be an active partner in efforts to carry on and to fulfill the mission of the rule of law that we all aspire to create and to pursue. So thank you very much. And that leads me to my own report. And you have actually a written version of the report in your materials. And I will not, you'll be relieved to hear, simply read those to you. I will, however, just talk about some of the highlights and some of the things that I'm most interested in and most proud of during what that have taken place now that my term as your president has passed the halfway point and is continuing on till May 31st. First, I report, obviously, today is the last day of our annual meeting. There was great concern as we approached the annual meeting as to whether or not we'd be able to pull it off virtually. And I think that everybody would agree that the answer is a resounding yes. Over the last 11 days, our members have gathered virtually and attended dozens of CLA programs, networking events, and section meetings. We've had somewhere in the vicinity of 4,000 attendees, and I have to say that I, for one, am most pleasantly surprised at how engaging the annual meeting has been. In fact, enthusiasm and participation seems to be as high as ever. And from a financial point of view, obviously, we've been able to, by maintaining a high participation rate while saving substantially on the costs of running the annual meeting, we have actually done fairly well in that regard too. We have had, over the course of the past 10, 11 days, some distinguished guests, one of whom you just heard from, our esteemed Chief Judge, Janet DiFiore, our Attorney General, Tish James, United States Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, and one thing that I'm perhaps most proud of was this year's presidential summit, which featured constitutional law scholar Dean Erwin Chemerinsky of the University of California at Berkeley Law School, and Dr. Erwin Redliner of Columbia University Medical Center, who gave their thoughtful perspectives on the legal, constitutional, and public health issues surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. And I understand from the comments I've received that the summit was very well received and turned out to be an illuminating event. And I am grateful to Dean Chemerinsky and Dr. Redliner, as well as to Liz Benjamin, our moderator. And I think it was a terrific event and one that we can all be proud of. This, as you know, has been a trying year for our association, and for me in particular, because of the fact that we have been relegated to virtuality. I am very grateful for the fact that that's the case, because our reliance on Zoom has enabled us to transact business and to conduct meetings such as the annual meeting without missing a beat. And it's without Zoom and without the other kinds of IT technologies that we've come to rely on, we would have been dead in the water. So I'm very grateful. But on the other hand, I think there's a level of disappointment, and you've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. One of the things that I always look forward to at the annual meeting and at all Bar Association events is to the ability to not only network, but to enjoy each other's company. We are, after all, not only an organization of lawyers, but in many cases, we are dear friends, and we look forward to the opportunity to see each other, to share a drink, to share a meal, to share a conversation, and to engage in the kind of collegiality and camaraderie that we've come to expect. And while some of that undoubtedly suffers when we proceed virtually, it remains our best alternative. And again, I'm grateful for it. But I do hope that we can get back in short order to the ability to be in each other's company and to break bread together and to share a cocktail and to talk about the issues face to face rather than across a computer screen. In addition, I want to pay homage and to the various task forces that I was involved in appointing, one of which is the task force on racial injustice and police reform that Chief Judge DiFiore just alluded to, which is co-chaired by President-elect Andrew Brown and Secretary-elect Taya Grays, who I look forward to working with as she becomes an officer in June. But they are doing a terrific job, and I am grateful for their hard work. They will, no doubt, they've had a number of public hearings. They've had a number of reports, interim reports, and there's no doubt that they will be, and I apologize, I seem to be getting some interference on my screen, and I will deal with that in a moment, but we will no doubt be receiving a compelling report and recommendations from that task force at the end of the year. In addition, I want to compliment our other task forces that are hard at work, including the nursing home and long-term care task force, the task force on COVID-19 liability and immunity, and of course the task force on attorney well-being. All of them are hard at work, and I thank them for their hard work. I look forward to the product of their reports. I also want to thank, as you know, we've just come through one of the most contentious elections in the history of the United States, and regrettably one that was not the election, well, maybe the election itself, but certainly post-election, leading up to the inauguration, some tragic violence that words cannot begin to describe. But through it all, our task force on the election, chaired by Jerry Goldfeder, has provided through our website and elsewhere timely and informative information to our members and to the public concerning the issues presented by this contentious election. And I am grateful for that. And I think we did a real service to the public, and as the Bar Association should under these circumstances. Just bear with me for 1 second. How is that? Is that any better? I hope so. When I got to my office this morning, the sun wasn't out yet, so I wasn't concerned about the glare on my screen, but obviously it became an issue as I continued. I apologize for that. Continuing on, one of the things that occurred during Hank's administration, former President Hank Greenberg, was that he and the Chief Judge entered into a program to provide pro bono legal services to the victims of the pandemic. And I took over that job when I became president, and I have been sharing responsibility for that program, which we call the COVID-19 Pro Bono Initiative. I've been sharing that leadership of that program with former Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman, and I'm happy to report that during the pandemic thus far, we have provided pro bono counsel to numerous individuals requiring pro bono representation, and we've also referred many others to legal service providers who then in turn are able to provide the necessary pro bono representation to these folks. We have, I think we've done an amazing job, and we will continue to do that throughout the balance of this crisis, so long as it may take. And let me also make reference to the fact that those of you who are on the nominating committee, when I appeared before you to, in furtherance of my candidacy for president-elect, I made a pledge at that time that I would, during my year as president, take on a pro bono matter. And I'm pleased to report that I have done so. I am currently working on a pro bono appeal to the Appellate Division 4th Department through a program administered by our Committee on Courts of Appellate Jurisdiction Pro Bono Appeals Program and the State University of New York at Buffalo Law School. It's a great opportunity, one that I'm proud to undertake. And I hope that many of you will also heed the call to help, whether through participation in the COVID-19 Pro Bono Initiative, or through service with the program I've just referred to, or with your local bar association, law school, or other legal service provider. I also am pleased to report that we are, alongside Start Small, Think Big and the New York State Bar Association and the court system, we will be launching the Commercial Eviction Prevention Partnership to provide mediation for landlords and commercial tenants facing eviction. I look forward to sharing more information on this initiative with you in the days to come. This pandemic has been a trying time for all of us. It's upended every aspect of our lives, both professional and personal. And the New York State Bar Association has been well positioned to adapt to this new virtual reality in which we live. We will continue to approach the problems created by the pandemic, and to make sure that our role as guardians of justice is not in any way diminished. I look forward to addressing you again in April. As always, I thank my fellow officers, President-elect T. Andrew Brown, Secretary Sherry Levin-Wallach, Treasurer Dominic Napolitano, and immediate past President Hank Greenberg. And now, of course, my congratulations to soon-to-be Secretary Taya Grays for their service, wisdom, advice, and friendship. I also thank our unparalleled Executive Director, Pam McDevitt, and her superb staff for their tireless performance during these difficult times. Our section and committee chairs and all presenters, I thank them as well for their exceptional dedication in ensuring that this virtual annual meeting was a success. And I thank you, our delegates and members, for all that you do day in and day out to make our association great. It is my pleasure and honor to serve as your president, and I look forward to the next few months in staying the course. And until then, until my next report, I invite you all to stay well and keep involved. Thank you. And now that I have thanked myself, I will proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is the report of our treasurer, Dominic Napolitano. Dominic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you're all healthy and safe. Today, I will be reporting on the results of operations of the New York State Bar Association for the year ending December 2020. I'll be doing so without the Abbott and Costello tapes. I've seen some of the chats. Where are they? They've been archived. Additionally, I will report on some other matters that will have a financial impact on 2021, as well as in future years to come. If you can please turn to the first slide. The first slide on the screen shows our revenue, expenses, and surplus for December 2020. As you can see, our revenue is down by about $1.7 million. Our expenses have also decreased substantially, and as a result, our operating surplus is now approximately $570,000 more than it was last year. However, I would note that invoices will continue to come in, and accruals will continue to reduce this amount as we gear up for our audit in March. We continue to remind our staff to follow up with all vendors that they may not have yet submitted their invoices for 2020. Additionally, as we use our actuary to determine our annual expenses for post-retirement medical plans, we will not have an accurate account of this expense until we receive that report by the end of next month. I would note that due to the pandemic, our employees have used less paid time off and sick days. Thereby, this will substantially increase our accrual for payroll as well. Return to slide 2. Our next slide shows our revenue decreases for 2020. Dues revenue through December 31st, 2020 has been reported at $9,250,000. $317,000, which is about $321,000 less than it was the year before. We unfortunately continue to decline in our membership revenue, which decline has been consistently upwards of $300,000 per year for, unfortunately, again, the last several years. Additionally, contributing to this decrease of revenue, as I reported last time we met, it's attributed to the cancellation of all 2020 programs, which was likewise resulted in section program revenue reduction of approximately $1.7 million. The decrease in that amount was due to no revenue registrations coming in for destination meetings for sections. Return to slide 3, please, Tom. This slide shows the deferred dues. Even more ominous is the balance in deferred dues at the end of December of last year. As you can see from this slide, the dues collected in 2020 for the current year is $1.6 million less than it was the prior year. We did send out invoices later in 2021, which may have had an impact on this. The Finance Committee will continue to monitor this throughout this coming year. Finance Committee met recently, but we'll continue to look at this. The next slide shows our continuing, our CLE, which again continues to be a very bright spot in our income statement. CLE revenue is reported at $3,081,000 through December of last year. This is only $72,000 less than it was in 2019 and $139,000 less than what we budgeted. As webinars require less cost, our CLE expense is just a little under $500,000 at $499. This is a huge decrease over the prior years. The CLE department, thanks to Kathy Sikorsky and her staff, have presented a total of 489 programs through December of last year, which were attended by 34,425 participants, offering 425 CLE credits. That's an outstanding job, and we thank them for all of their hard work in making this happen. The CLE platform, again, as I had reported earlier, was easily converted into programs and webinars. Other CLE providers, which I feared, as I reported as well, have now adapted their delivery models. And although we are very pleased with the great success that we saw in 2020, it is possible that it may not continue into 2021. But I can assure you that the CLE department will do all that it can do to maintain the same pace as it did in 2020. I would note, however, that being cognizant of what amounts to the unknown future, we have reduced our CLE budget accordingly this year. We could go to the next slide. I want to now briefly touch upon some of the expense changes that have occurred. As I noted at the beginning of my report, section revenue has decreased substantially as there were no destination meetings. Likewise, as you can see here, section expenses have also accordingly decreased substantially by $2.1 million. Since the pandemic has required us to only meet virtually since April of last year, we realized savings in both committee costs for meetings and travel expenses for both staff and committee members. Tom, the next slide, please. During this past summer, we had some work done to the outside of the bar center. In 2019, we contracted to have the entire building recaulked over a 3-year period at a cost of approximately $100,000 per year. The building was also recently power washed at a cost of about $95,000. Additionally, our real estate tax expense is now approximately $165,000 per year, which, as I reported in the past, we have challenged. And to be clear, our challenge addresses the law which imposed the tax, not the amount of the tax itself. Our IT costs have also increased quite a bit due to our transition to a new member management system from the old. For much of last year, we retained consultants from both the new system and the old, which was FusionSpan, from which we transitioned. We also outsourced our Chief Technology Officer position, the cost of which are included in the consultant fees and which are therefore offset by a reduction in personnel costs. Next slide, please, Tom. Lastly, as I mentioned at the outset, I want to talk about some upcoming events that will have a financial impact on this year and in years beyond. I reported yesterday to the Executive Committee that we applied for a Paycheck Protection Program loan. And as I noted in June, our 501c6 organizations such as ours were not eligible during the first round of the PPP loan last spring. However, since the change in the law recently, we were allowed to make application, and we did. The loan calculation is based on 2.5 months of the average salary, which includes certain fringe benefits. A loan request that we made was $1,500,000. I'm happy to announce today that our PPP loan was processed through Signature Bank, located in my stomping grounds of Brooklyn, and was approved by the SBA. And our account, which we established at Signature Bank, is now being funded at $1,519,012.50. I think that 50 cents is going to come in very handy. Turning to our lease, as some of you know, or most of you should know by now, with the Bar Foundation expires at the end of this year. Both the association and the foundation have appointed committees to handle the lease negotiation. Past President Dave Miranda will give you an update on those negotiations a little later this morning. As President Carson reported, our annual meeting, our first virtual annual meeting, which finished just the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact, has made a great success. I mean, a huge success. Our net revenue for 2021 is $465,000, which compared to $216,000 in 2020 is a substantial gain. So kudos to everyone who made this year's annual meeting, albeit virtual, a grand success. Many of you are also aware that we have a contract with USI. USI is the exclusive endorsed insurance administrator for plans that are offered to our members. Under this contract, we receive an annual administrative fee of $300,000. In 2020, we also received a royalty of $25 per member. Based, however, on the decline in membership, the revenue under this program will more than likely decrease, we estimate, by about $158,000 for the current year. The contract with USI will expire at the end of this year. I want to thank all of you for your attentiveness to my report. I know that we will continue to do our best to keep everyone updated of any changes that occurred in this ever-changing financial landscape. Mr. President, that is my report to the House.
I thank you, Dominic, for your report, which is received with the thanks of the association. Did you intend to take questions at this time?
If there are any, I'll take them.
All right, I don't know if there are or not, but let's just hold on for a moment. Okay. There is a question in the chat. Is it correct that the substantial savings resulting from the lack of an in-person annual meeting, no Hilton expense, is not reflected in the financials presented? Isn't the reduction in section revenue at least in part resulting from the fact that NYSBA took all the revenue from all section programs during the pandemic? So it's just I can't make out the word, but you have the gist of the question. If you want to respond, I invite you to do so.
This ongoing issue concerning NYSBA taking all of the section proceeds is getting a little tiresome. I chaired the general practice section this year, and as I mentioned on previous occasions, the offset to NYSBA taking the income from the annual meeting or from other webinars on CLEs that in the past were being done from sections is and will be attributed until there's a change to the fact that NISBA does not charge back sections for cost to it for doing what staff does. So I don't really think that that's an appropriate question. Respectfully, I say that to whomever posed it. It's growing a little tiresome, as I said. We had no cost to the Hilton, so I don't see how that question is pertinent here. The reduction, the expense reduction, as I reported, is attributed to the fact that there were no destination meetings. Staff didn't have to travel. Committee members didn't have to travel. So that cost is substantially reduced. And the income reduction, again, is simply because there were no destination meetings and therefore there was no revenue being generated as a result of that for the section. So the numbers that I reported are accurate and they reflect what today's reality is given what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominic, for your report, which, as I said, is received with the thanks of the association. I would also just point out that there is one other item on the chat which says, we are one association, folks. If the association fails, so fail the sections and committees. I come from the sections and I have chaired a section and a committee, and I believe we are all one association, and that's from Michael Fox. So with that,
well, Mr. President, I want to thank Professor Fox for that comment because I think he stated it very succinctly. I was going to say that, but I don't like this idea about big bar. I keep hearing big bar, little bar. I mean, there's no big bar, little bar. It's a bar association. And we are all, as Michael rightfully said, the New York State Bar Association. There are no two separate bars. The sections don't make up their own bar association. So I want to thank Michael, Professor, for making that statement. Thank you, Mike.
thank you. Now, at this time, I'm going to close the treasurer's report and proceed with the next agenda item, which is the report and recommendations of the Committee on Bylaws. The proposed amendments, which will be considered by you this morning, provide for remote meetings of the association and its entities. In compliance with Article 17 of the bylaws, a majority of the full membership of the House subscribed to the proposed amendments at the November 2020 House meeting. In further compliance with Article 17, notice of the proposed changes was published in the New York State Bar Association weekly email to the entire membership. I now call upon the chair of our Committee on Bylaws, Robert T. Schofield, who will present the proposed amendments. Bob, are you ready?
I am. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Please
Good morning,
proceed.
everyone. Before I get started with the meat of the report, I just want to give a thank you to Deputy General Counsel Tom Richards for sending me the background that you see behind me. For those of you I haven't seen since April, you may have noticed I've been lengthening my beard, shaving a little closer on the sides, thinning my glasses, all in an effort to emulate a slightly younger, more chiseled version of President Carson. And I think with the background today, I've completed the look. So thank you, Tom. So moving on to the real business at hand. As President Carson indicated, the Bylaws Committee presented earlier this year amendments to the bylaws that were started as a result of the Special Committee on Association Structure and Operations observation that the bylaws really did not provide adequately for remote meetings of the association, the House of Delegates, or its sections and committees. The report that was presented in June and subscribed by the House is part of your materials today, and it summarizes the fact that the committee has recommended that Article 5, Section 5, be amended to add a reference to remote meetings of the House of Delegates. that Article 12, Section 3 be amended to clarify the definition of in-person attendance at meetings of the association, specifically to include attendance via video conference, and that Article 13, previously titled Meetings by Telephonic Equipment, be retitled Remote Meetings and be expanded to cover new forms of interactive communication technology. In its report in June, the committee had also recommended that the association have an entity appropriately chosen to review legislation that may be necessary to amend the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law, Section 603, to make permanent the permissibility of holding an annual or membership meeting of a non-for-profit, much like the association, by remote means. And we also recommended that the nominating committee be asked to take a look at its own rules to make a determination as to the appropriateness of permanently adding remote meetings to their rules. Currently, the nominating committee is excluded from our rule change in the bylaws because of the special nature of the activities that they engage in. Just by way of quick further summary, this is really being driven by practicalities. These are not bylaw changes that are really anything more than cleanup to clarify that indeed the bylaws are written to allow for the type of meetings that we're having here. I think they could have been read to allow them previously, and the language that's being added is really intended to just clarify that authority. So with that, Mr. President, I would make a motion to have the annual membership meeting or the membership approve the bylaw change.
And I second that motion. And before we proceed with the discussion, I would ask that any procedural motions be held, if there are any, be held until speakers have had a reasonable opportunity to be heard on the merits. I reserve the right to limit the remarks to 3 minutes or less. And please do not be repetitive because time is always of the essence. I may have to limit debate further should time require, but after a number of speakers have had the opportunity to speak, we can then open the floor for procedural motions and then ultimately take an appropriate vote. And with that being said, I would ask that any discussion, please indicate on the chat. I am not seeing any discussion at all. Tom, am I correct in that?
You are correct, Scott.
Okay, so then we will proceed to a vote on the.
Yeah, there is. I'm sorry. There is one. There's now 2 hands raised: John Leo and James Joseph.
Okay, John Leo, did you say?
James Joseph.
Okay, James Joseph, do you have a question or a comment?
Please unmute. Mr. Joseph, please unmute.
I do not, thank you. I think that's a problem with my Zoom. I apologize.
Okay.
You're fine now.
Did you say John Leo also, or was I mistaken in that?
Yes, John Leo also raised his hand.
John, Your Honor, do you have a question or a comment? Apparently not. So, and I see no others, and I will therefore resume by calling the question and calling for a vote on the proposal of the Committee on Bylaws. Do we have a voting ballot for the screen? Okay. Please complete your vote and submit it. The ayes clearly have it. The motion to adopt carries decisively. And Robert, thank you for your good work and the work of your committee in bringing this to us.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. At this time, we will be adjourning the annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association. But before we do, I want to just, as I understand it, the House of Delegates meeting, which will follow in a few minutes, scheduled to start at 10:15, but that will require a different Zoom invitation. So once we adjourn, please sign off and re-enter the Zoom under the sign-in information for the House of Delegates meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I only hear ayes,
Aye.
so here we are. We have a motion to adjourn. Please submit it. Okay, the motion to adjourn carries. This meeting is adjourned, and as I said, please sign out and then re-sign in for the House of Delegates meeting, which will follow in about 5 minutes. Thank you.